So for those of you who are new to us here at My HR Toolkit, we provide HR software specifically built for SMEs by us as an SME. And we're also running an ongoing program of webinars specialized for SMEs, covering a variety of HR and business topics. And so today we're going to look at company culture as a platform for business growth. And in this webinar, we'll be covering key elements of culture and growth within your business, including strong and visible leadership, promoting success, the importance of flexibility and benefits, engagement, performance and well-being, and expressing your mission, vision and values. And following the presentation, which is going to last around 30 minutes, we're also going to have time to answer some of your questions in a special Q&A. So if you have a little look on your Zoom menu, there should be a Q&A option in there. So feel free to add questions to that as we're going through the presentation, and we'll address those questions at the end. We've also got the Zoom chat. As you can see, people are getting involved in the chat already, mostly talking about weather-related things, but during the presentation, feel free to get involved as well. But do make sure you ask questions in the Q&A that you want to get to answered so we don't miss them. And just as a short note, today's session is offering general and not legal advice. So without further ado, here to talk to us this morning about company culture is Karen Penfold, who was the Chief Human Resources Officer for Agilio software, and she has a wealth of experience in HR and operations. Karen helped develop the market-leading dental compliance software solution Agilio iComply, and using her human resources skills, Karen is the founder of the Agilio iTeam HR service and continues to be integral to its ongoing development. So Karen, hello. Welcome to the webinar today.
Good morning. Hi, Camille. Hi, everyone. Okay, is that showing now?
Yeah, that's all up perfectly.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Okay, so I'll power down for a little bit.
Okay.
And yeah, let you take the stage.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to Camille and Hannah as well for when they asked me to present the first one in January. I'm not, a little bit nerve-wracking and haven't done a webinar for a little while, mainly down to the pandemic and different things that have been happening across the board. So we're going to talk about culture, and I'm assuming because you've joined us today that culture is important to yourselves and something you're thinking about. I'm just going to share my first slide here, which is actually showing how culture has actually risen to the top of the leadership agenda, or certainly risen up the ladder from what it used to be. I think some people used to see it as sort of a fluffy thing, something nice to have about the engagement and looking after your team. But actually, it's really, really important to your strategy and your growth as a business. So we've just, I've asked Camille to do a poll early on, actually, at the moment. And this is, if you might see it pop up in the chat, about how important is your cultural strategy to your business growth. So seeing if it's similar to yourselves, it's become very important to myself and Agilio, and I'll touch on that in a moment. Okay.
Yep, that poll should be running now. I see some people are answering it already. Everyone's
Excellent.
keen. Brilliant.
Brilliant.
Yeah, just wait a few seconds to give people time to answer.
And just while you're doing that, just a bit of background on Agilio and why I'm particularly looking at culture more than ever. So we've come from a small business at first, a small platform of 7 employees, and over the last 6 years we've acquired further businesses, and we're now sitting at about 180 employees. And the challenges with that, when you're buying and acquiring businesses to build on that platform, you've got different cultures across those businesses. We've got 5 that have joined together. And on top of that, they're across the whole country. So we've got all of the different logistics, the cultural differences across there as well. And then throwing the pandemic into the mix, like everyone else, it's how you roll out the culture remotely and those changes. So we'll just draw down to, that's again why it's top of my agenda at the moment. Okay, shall I? We got any results?
Yeah, just share the results there.
I think it'd be interesting when we do the Q&A later, if that has changed since the pandemic. Those that are saying it's very important and quite important now, has that changed in your priority from if we were doing this poll, say, a couple of years ago? So it's something to think about. Okay. just seeing if I can, so my screen's frozen, Camille, I seem to be able to, there we go. So what we're going to touch on today is, I just wanted to look at, it's not just about what makes a good company culture, it's about what actually makes a great one. So in this session, I'm just going to share some things from the Glassdoor. Some of you may be familiar, that sort of league table of what employees are saying about companies they like working for, and those top companies in the UK in particular. We're also going to look at the culture link. If you've got a great culture in the business, how does that feed into all areas of the business to drive growth? And we're going to just touch on those different areas and if you've got a great culture, what the impact of that has and going forward. But then also on the back of this, so the previous statistics I just shared with you is actually from PwC PricewaterhouseCoopers, a survey they did last year, over 3,200 workers. And from that survey, they collated this information around 9 key culture enablers that drive growth in a business. I'm just going to touch on an overview of those, because I think they're really important and they'll just really make you think about what you need to implement if you haven't got it already. So it's not just about building that great culture, it's then sustaining it and how do you keep it going, how do you adapt? So again, things to think about there throughout the slides as well. And we will have some learnings and takeaways, and I'm looking forward to hopefully some good questions and chat at the end as well. So what I'm hoping to deliver in this, and again, I know we've only got half an hour to cover these things, is to give you a bit of an understanding of the correlation between what makes a great culture and the link to business optimization. So you'll notice I'm not just saying good, it's moving to great. And the key factors that employees and workers look for in a good company that will help you and enable you to attract and retain. And it is very much a candidates market at the moment, and we'll touch on that when we explore this area shortly. And I mentioned about the overview of the 9 key culture enablers. Okay. So one of my absolute favourite quotes, some of you may be familiar with this, and culture that eats strategy for breakfast. And this comes from, some of you may be familiar, he's a management sort of consultant and writer, and his name is Peter Drucker. And essentially, it's not saying that strategy isn't important, because it's incredibly important, but it's rather about saying if you've got a powerful and an empowering culture, then this actually gives you a surer, more definite route to organisational success. But you need both. You need a great strategy and you need a great culture, because you can't really have one without the other. So it's just something, some of these quotes that feed through. I think it's a very good book that he wrote as well that I'd recommend. So when we talk about organiser culture and how do we define it, and I was thinking about this from my perspective, and I'd encourage you to think about places that you've worked in before, where the culture was amazing, and what was it? What were the common denominators in that helped encourage in somewhere that you liked working? I think it stems from having a shared beliefs and behaviours and the same values, but also a goal. And I was thinking, where I've worked in a previous and the platform when I worked in CoPlan, the one passion that we had, we all completely believed in the products that we were working and developing, the same passion around our customers. We had the same behaviours and values and respect for each other, but that all stemmed from the leadership as well. And it was fed from the leadership top down. And the reason I think it's really important here to notice that I've put visible when I say strong, visible leadership, because you can have a fantastic leadership team or organisation, if nobody knows who they are or they don't see them. And I recognise it's been very difficult if you're leaders in your organisation to be able to go around and see team members in person since the pandemic. But there's ways to adapt that through town hall announcements, we've done, but over Teams and depending on what sort of remote working tools you're using. But it's really important that team members, employees know who the leadership team are and start to build that relationship. Something that is happening more and more with businesses now, and going into 2022-23, there seems to be less of a hierarchy and it's a more flat sort of leadership level. And I think that's because people are working more collaboratively together. So you can have all these amazing values and behaviours and the shared goal, but it's no good if we're not constantly reinforcing that. So there's lots of people that you start off when you join a business and you're told what the mission and the vision and the values are in your induction. But if any of you here, you know, then asked, say 6 months or 12 months later, what are they? Can you quote them? Most people wouldn't be able to. So it's about reinforcing them and actually making sure that people are working to those behaviours. So just jumping into another poll now, be interesting to know about, think about your own company culture and reflect, does it reflect your mission and core values that you have established, if you have them established yet? Camille, you're able to share that one?
Yeah, I've got that second poll running now. People are already in there answering.
Fantastic.
So we'll just let that run for a little bit to let everyone get involved, if you'd like.
I like seeing the results at the end, see what people think.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
And just one thing I do joke about with the Agilio team is that we're having a Agilio song that we'll stand up and sing in every Monday morning. And this is, we live, you know, our values. But again, humour is a big part of an organisational's culture as well.
Definitely, yeah. I think most people have answered the poll there, and they are all anonymous as well, just in case anyone's thinking, oh, is someone going to pick my answer? But yeah, everything is anonymous on these polls. Cool. Just let that run a few more seconds. Okay, I'll just share the results.
Okay. Interesting, really interesting. I thought it might be slightly lower on there, but not really. But that's, I mean, again, constantly revisiting them, and that's fantastic if your company is reflecting that, the culture. A lot of people have changed and reviewed their mission and culture, mission and vision and values throughout the pandemic, because it has completely changed, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, to move to the next slide. So some of you may or may not be familiar with the Glassdoor, and essentially this, I would say, it's a bit like TripAdvisor for employees. So it's an area that employees can review the places that they like work for, their companies. And it's actually used by candidates, and then when they're researching now, they will go onto the Glassdoor and they will look and see what a company is like, what the reviews are like. So really important for reputation. I've just shared some quotes in the next couple of slides, and that came from when I was doing my research into what actually makes a company so amazing to work. And there's common themes that jump out at me through all of these. And just to reassure you, they are not all big companies. Yes, in the top 10, you've got your Google, you've got your HubSpot and those types of things. But there are smaller businesses in there as well that have really tried to work with their employees to get to onto that list in turn as well. So some of the words that jump out, what makes a great place to work, you'll see here, it's about being friendly, it's about caring. That comes up a lot throughout the quotes. A company that cares, company likes developing team members, and also working with amazing people, your colleagues, those that have a great work ethic. Fun comes up a lot. The company's fun to work for, feel valued, feel cared about, feel I'm working toward, there's a point to what I'm doing, that their company wants to develop me, invest in me. And you'll see here the response. A lot of companies have been judged on how they responded to the pandemic. And again, we will touch on those in a moment, because those that did fared particularly well in terms of moving forward in their productivity. A good team culture, challenging work, lots of people ask about that. Flexibility, work-life balance is a big one. And companies now, if you're not flexible, I think something we've worked from, found out from the pandemic, that you start insisting that people come into the office, you're going to lose people, because people want that flexibility now. They've had a taste of that home working. So lots of hybrid types working that are working particularly well. You'll notice the benefits haven't come up that often. And it's touching that it's not all about amazing benefits. I think it's the whole shebang in some words. The one thing I think is quite succinct here, they love the culture, they love the people, the flexibility, the benefits, the training, everything. It's a great company, it's unique. And this is the competitive advantage that you need to have. So just moving on to, so the culture, the platform for growth. And the reason I called it this, I've been reading lots of books. There's lots of books out there. I'm old school. I've got a Kindle, but I still love a paperback. And there's lots of books on culture and the culture code you may have heard of. And essentially being at the centre of business growth. And you'll just see a great culture and how it feeds into every area of the business if you can get the culture right and keep building on that. So if we just touch on the first one, if you have a great culture, what impact does that have on retaining and attracting top talent? Some of this may seem completely common sense to you, and it does to me, and it is an element of that. But at the moment, we know it is a candidates market after the pandemic. And in particular, there are more jobs out there than ever before, which is amazing for the economy. However, we know that employers are having to go above and beyond to attract the amazing talent that's out there and also retain. You may have noticed in interviews more than ever that candidates will ask, what is the culture like? That's something that I think in the last few years that didn't always come up, but millennials in particular is a question they like to ask. What's it like working for your company? Why should I want to work for your company? And it's not just being about the pay and the benefits that you're offering. So candidates will research, now the company culture. So I think it's an opportunity to help, if you've got a good culture, promote that company culture on your careers page, for example. If you have a LinkedIn life page, that's a fantastic way to show the different things that you get involved in. And that's not just about your company branding, your reputation, but in terms of share some reviews from your team members already and what they think of working for the business. And also all the things that you're involved in. If you're doing more things out there with charities and your social corporate responsibility, that type of thing, it's a great place to market that because people are genuinely interested. The other thing I've noticed since in the last year or so, maybe similar to this, is recruitment is really, really tough at the moment to attract really great people. And we've got to the stage where even you've got to the offer stage and they're about to accept, and then they're almost top trumped. Someone else has swooped in to get that person, and it could be that they're offering not just pay and benefits, but the whole package, and they seem to be able to win them over to move to that business. But also retaining your employees. We've noticed that people that aren't even looking to move are now being approached potentially by recruiters on LinkedIn and having their heads turned by companies that are wanting to attract them by being more competitive. So it's really important that you think about promoting why should they work for you over anyone else, and think about what you offer in turn for that. If we can do that, if we can retain the talent and attract some amazing people, so the impact on your growth and your bottom line is your reduction in turnover, but also it feeds into all the other areas of business in terms of collaboration, initiatives, and we'll touch on those now. I think a big one that people ask for, and I look for in a business and think about places that you may have worked before, is having that culture of trust and integrity and respect between yourself and your employees. So it's not just one way, it goes both ways. And when you think about your employment contract, there's that mutual trust and obligation. Sometimes you don't have to spell it out. You need to be able to trust each other that you're going to look after them and you're going to be valuing them. So I think companies that can do this and show this can only benefit in terms of the communication is better, that people will be comfortable in putting their hands up if they've made a mistake. I mean, I've worked for businesses before where you've literally been terrified to admit a mistake, and we've all done it where you cover up the mistake and it make it a lot worse. And so it's in that respect, I think it's really important that you encourage that. People know that if they've made a mistake, that they can talk to you about it and you can review it and learn from it as well. But also they want to go the extra mile for you. And we've been through so much in the last couple of years, and when you've had staff shortages and different things, people are having to step up and adapt. And if they trust you and they know you care and value them, they will do this. So it can only increase your productivity. If they feel supported and if you feel you've got that empathy in a business as well, then they're more likely to stay with you and that loyalty will be there. So very, very important one. And I've just only put here about culture, which does actually mean the word care from Latin, which I think is quite an interesting thing to think about. So huge item on the agenda. through, and again on the back of the pandemic, whether this was as important before. I think certainly mental well-being, but also physical well-being for your team members. We need to build, have a culture that builds that resilience, that helps people feel supportive, but also the stronger that you can support them in those areas, the less likely they're going to go off sick, the more productive they're going to be. And also it stems back to that loyalty that they'll want to stay and retain and stay with you. I think what's shown through the pandemic, that those companies that did show more empathy and support to their employees through the whole thing have actually proven that they've been more productive, they've had less leavers, and they've been able to adapt and extend that culture from being in the office through to remote working, which is, I think, pretty impressive from there. So this employee wellbeing should be top of your agenda as well in terms of looking after your employees. So we're just going to throw in another poll here, because, and this is one which is about, has the pandemic had a positive or negative impact on your company culture?
Yeah, just running that one now. So you
you
all know the drill at this point. Just yeah, give everyone a bit of time to answer the poll.
Excellent. Gives me time to have a quick sip.
Yes, yeah, definitely. The most important part of any webinar is yeah, tea access. Okay, just leave that running for a few more seconds in case anybody else wants to answer, is having a deep think about their answer. Never know. Okay. All right, I think I will share the results of that one. Okay.
Okay, that's really, really interesting. And I think we should also, I mean, maybe at the Q&A at the end, it'd be interesting to know, or if people put it in the chat, have you had to adapt your culture? But also, I think the mixture is definitely there. We're all still learning from it. I think we're still reeling a little bit from the pandemic. It's not over yet, isn't it? From that side.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Okay, I'll just move to the next one. Collaboration. I think this is one of my favorite ones. If you've got a great company culture, it encourages that collaboration, and I've got here, reap the benefits from that. I think about places I've worked where the company encourages that working together, and the benefits from it, that you can actually solve problems, that you're not afraid to put your hand up and ask colleagues for help and share those ideas. So you're only going to get more ideas from that. There's going to be more innovation, but a really good one, if you're working and collaborating with your colleagues that have different skills to you, you're going to upskill, you're going to train your teams without, internally, rather than, having to invest, or in addition to investing to external training. So it's a huge, benefit to having a culture that encourages collaboration. And in terms of that, it's not just you're collaborating with your team members internally, it's also encouraging the networking as well, that they can collaborate externally with other businesses of similar, that you could maybe join together in different areas. And a big one through helping people adapt at the moment through home working, and how we've had to change so many things over the last couple of years. And if, like Agilio, you're moving into lots of change initiatives, then if you've got collaboration and in turn the trust and the health and mental health well-being, that resilience, you're able to work and achieve those change initiatives a lot smoother. Which can only have, so I've talked a lot about all the people element and how it feeds into each other, and the great company culture feeding out to that. But actually, how does it increase your revenue, and how does it impact on your bottom line? Well, research has shown that actually companies with strong work cultures have actually seen that the data supporting this, a 4 times increase in revenue growth, which is huge. And you've probably seen that around in different places. But that is a huge number that just shows that increase in productivity just by making sure that your culture is at the centre and feeding into all these different areas. we're not just about looking after your employees. If you've got strong employees and they're happy, but high employee satisfaction here is also rubs off onto your customer satisfaction. And going back to what your employer brand is and thinking about what your customers see in your reputation. If they're speaking to team members on the line, if you've got helplines, for example, or customer service, people can pick up that employees are happy. But also if they're getting different people all the time, it shows that you've got a high turnover, and I think that can rub off, and customers can be put off sometimes by that. Okay. So one of the polls surveys I mentioned earlier by PwC, and if you haven't seen this, I think I'd recommend having a look at this into more detail. I've only sort of got time to sort of top level really on this. So this is a survey carried out throughout 2021, and they I think it included just over 3,000 workers, and it was a global survey as well. And so essentially from that data and everything that they pulled together, they identified that there are 9 culture enablers. I like terminology with this as well, that will help you put together a great culture and then deliver that growth and productivity that we're looking for. And what they're saying is a company only really needs, if they've got more than four or more of these culture change enablers, it will actually have a significant lift in the culture and also give you a competitive advantage and your organization's ability to adapt. So I think some of these we've sort of touched on, some of them, they seem quite obvious in some ways. But going back to from the top down, so the tone from the top, so setting your organization's missions and vision and values. And a big one that we're talking about, and you probably hear much more now, is behaviours are part of that. So what are the behaviours that you want to see in your colleagues and your team members that you want to demonstrate as well? And that goes back to that integrity, non-blame culture, sharing ideas, and how are you going to measure those as well? So the key thing is that needs to come from the top down and be communicated and then reinforced, going back to that as well going forward. A big push now going forward into is digitization. Technology and tools is huge, and from the remote working, the hybrid working, this has evolved so much over the last 2 years. And if you've got great technology, it can improve that remote working engagement. So something, for example, we use a lot of Teams in Agilio, and we keep finding a new tool in Teams every day that you can use. Only yesterday, for example, there's a praise element in that you can share kudos and give kudos to your team members. But we're looking actually to create an employee intranet just through Teams, and just sharing announcements. It's had a really positive impact to making people feel involved. So have a think about what you've got in place in your business as well. Reviewing, so another side is you still need incentives. We need to celebrate success. We need compensation. We need some good benefits in place to attract and be competitive. So not just the salary, all of the other perks and things about working for a business. And a big one, I think, is going back to that flexibility. I think if you're flexible as an employer, you're going to get flexibility as in an employee as well. So the investment on development and training, this is not just in terms of people want to know where they can go in a business. So are they only stuck in this role? Are there opportunities throughout the business? And how will they be invested in and valued to reach that? So something we're working on at the moment, some of you may have used, is the 9 grid box, which is sort of a talent management tool. And it's very interesting to look at, okay, who are your superstars in the business and how are we going to nurture them, develop them so they don't leave and get their heads turned and go to someone, a competitor, for example. So
just had a question, sorry, in the chat from Damien, who asks, are those 9 points in order of importance?
Good question, Damien. So the way that PwC have put it, no, not in order. I think they wanted to stand with the data showing that the tone from the top is definitely number 1. So it's more about if you can pick 4 of these. So not say if you've got 4 of these in place or more, you're on your way to having that strong culture change enablers, and just keep building on those. So I would, the way I've done, is almost work through the list and think, okay, we've got that. Where are we weak on? And see what else you can build on. Does that help at all?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
it.
so. Yeah, Damien said
Oh,
yes as well.
fantastic. Thanks, Damien.
Brill.
It's a really interesting survey, actually, and I recommend having a look at that. And I mean, it goes back to, I don't know, what people think of engagement used to be. And I said to Camille yesterday, it's not about the fluffy stuff. And engagement and employee engagement isn't just about making your employees happy or having fun days out or, you know, pizza delivered. It's actually how engaged are they with what's happening in the business. How do they understand the strategy? Do they know what you're trying to achieve? Is that communicated? And do they feel part of that? I think as human beings, we all want to feel part of something and understand what the point to our work and our workload is and why we're doing it. And so it's really changing in terms of how employers are looking at employees in this way. And it used to be that just the leadership teams or the C-suite would know what the strategy is, and those on the front line potentially were not involved, and that wasn't communicated to them. But now I think one thing that things like Zoom and Teams have done, that you can have a really good town hall announcement. So you can have, you know, your opening January strategy Teams call where the chief exec will share everything about this is what we're planning to do for the next year, and people can listen and feel part of that. But you need to keep doing those throughout the years, and even if it's every 3 months, so people feel that buy-in and how the business is evolving and changing. So not just, again, not just the fluffy stuff, it's actually what do the stats say? What I mentioned earlier about having a strong culture can actually increase your bottom line by, you know, ×4, which is amazing. But these are fresh stats that some of those are from the PwC survey and also from a Gallup survey that was released last year as well. So they're saying now 69% of senior leaders credit much of their success during the pandemic to culture. And that's proven those that actually were looking after their teams, valued their teams, and showed empathy and support through the pandemic, have got that loyalty. They're not leaving them now. They're staying. They carried on working through it, and you're all in it together. That's a huge percent. I think it's quite significant. This one is stands 58% of people say they trust strangers more than their own boss. How awful is that? And you may be aware of this, that more people leave their jobs because of their line manager relationship than of any other reason. And that's, so it's something that I would work on with developing line managers, and the culture feeds through from them in terms of delivering the behaviours that you want. And 48% of employees start looking for a new job if the company culture is poor. And that is something that people are jumping ship now if you haven't got it right. And they may not have been looking for a job, but their heads are being turned by the amount of opportunities and jobs that are out there. So if you want to keep your top talent, and then that's something you really need to work on. And I think this, because this was a global survey they did, 87% of the world's workforce are not engaged with their businesses, yet engaged workplaces are 21% more profitable. Huge statistics. So lots of work to be done, and they're going forward. And how can we use this, and how can you use this in your business to get statistics down? So we've just gone through understanding the correlation between what is a great culture and the link to business optimization. Some of the key factors that employees look for in a good company. So we talked about, they want the development opportunities, they want the great culture we touched on, they want to feel cared about, valued. Yes, benefits are still there. They want to work for a company that cares about the environment is a big one now as well, and also moving that direction. And also we touched on the 9 key culture enablers that drive growth. So I think this is an interesting one. I was going to ask you to have a think about. You can perhaps share this in the chat box if you like as well. Think about, would you be happy working for your own business now if you're the owner or manager or owner? Think about what is the culture like where you're currently working? And again, this is, it can be anonymous if you want to, but if you want to share that, just something to, when you're thinking about the culture, is this a place that you'd want to work for if it wasn't your own business? And I think it just really resonates with me. So before we go into some of the Q&As, I think we've got a last poll coming up as well in a moment, which is about, are you actually measuring the impact of your cultural strategy? If you have a cultural strategy in place, or it's one that you're just about to start looking at and working on. So to take away I want you to think about your current culture, going back to, if it's your own business, you're the manager, is everything you've got in place at the moment, is it helping or hindering your ability to drive your company goals? What do you need to do, think about and change to improve things there? And that can be through employee surveys. One thing that I've recently done is release an employee engagement survey across the whole of the Agilio group, bracing myself for that feedback, but it's invaluable, and you need that employee voice. So also we're setting up an Agilio culture club. So team members that aren't leaders or managers, but those on the front line will be part of that culture club and be able to feed back into you, so you can see what's happening in the business right across the board. So review and identify what traits and behaviours that you most need to evolve to best support your strategic business goals. So going back to that PwC 9 points, what have you got in place already? What haven't you got, and what do you need to build on from that as well? And then it's proactively start managing culture and being able to then, building it as we speak, but actually sustaining it. It needs to be constantly reinforced, constantly reviewed, and put it, in that sense, making sure that your team members feel like they're the most important asset in your business. Some of you may have touched a little bit about Agilio software, and if you do want to find out a little bit more about us, this is our website here. So we are essentially, we are a software provider. We're a tech company that provide software for GPs, hospitals and dental practices across the UK. And if you want to have a look on there and see what we're all about. And my HR Toolkit, I'm really happy to say, are part of our team as well, and we're working very closely together on that. So thank you very much for today, for this morning. Any questions?
Okay. Yeah, very happy to be part of the Agilio family. Yeah, really lovely to do this webinar together as well. Yes, as Karen just mentioned, we are going to go on to the Q&A now. So if you do have questions for Karen, now is the time to ask your most burning questions. We have a few questions that have sort of come in the chat earlier on, so perhaps we could start off with a couple of those, Karen. We sort of move on to Q&A questions. So one of the questions we had that came in that I thought was really great. Someone asks, you mentioned that trust is a key trait of a positive company culture. As an employer, how would you recommend building up trust with employees?
I think the first one is to do what you'll say, deliver on what you say you will do. So, and also transparency. So don't just tell employees the good stuff, make sure you're sharing with them some of the negative things, some things that are in the business that need to be addressed. So I think transparency is a real key one, and that communication, that you're not just giving them all the top lines, you're actually giving them a little bit more detail about what you can put right, for example. So I think it's really important that when an employee knows that they can come to you, and if they put their hands up, they've made a mistake, that you're not going to judge them on that. And if you say you're going to give them training, that you do that. So it's all delivering on what your promises are. Hopefully that helps.
Awesome, no, great response, thank you. Someone's also asked, do you have any recommendations of how you can do team building remotely?
I love that. This is a great chat too, and if other people want to join in here, what we're doing. So what we have done is, again, the Microsoft Teams has been amazing. It has changed things culturally in a big way, and we've had to adapt to that. But we have introduced some fun things in terms of, we have a fun Friday quiz, and we've introduced a fun Teams channel, and so people interact on that channel. We're also an employees newsletter which shares more about everybody. That we've got lots of new starters, for example, that people had never met because of the pandemic, never met in person. So there's ways of introducing them to feel part of that. Little mini coffee mornings to reach out to colleagues you've never spoken to before. And just so there is the fun element, I think is important as well. But asking people, I mentioned about the Agilio Culture Club, asking your team members for ideas and, what can they do? Having that little mini culture club of fun, which really helps to bring people together.
Nice, thank you. I've definitely been enjoying the fun channel
Yeah,
that
it's
we
great.
have and all the things people pop on there. Everyone's obsessed with Wordle at the moment, which I think is partly my fault for mentioning
Exactly.
it. So that's definitely
That
been
was
a big
good. I
big
was just
trend.
thinking, the one thing we did as well that was particularly good when we rebranded, so some of the big events, we actually invited a virtual magician, and we had everybody on a Teams channel, and the magician did it was fantastic, and we invited, so people working from home, they could have their families there and join in, and it worked really well. And that was just to mark some of, a bit of a thank you to everyone, but just
Really
and it was finishing, and finishing a bit early. Sometimes there's the employee appreciation days, there's things that you can implement to make people feel part of it.
Definitely. Yeah, we do have a question that's come in from Damien, who asks, what strategies do you employ to get employees to live the company values on a day-to-day basis?
That's a very good question, Damien. And so essentially, I think it starts with, I mentioned top down, but training for me, it's making sure we do coaching with our line managers. It's got to come from our line managers, that especially when they're working remotely. We've got hybrid working in all of our offices that's starting to come back in. But the starting point is, what are our values and behaviours? What do we want to encourage team members to buy into day to day? Part of that is also sharing our mission. And so we do leadership days as well. We managed to hold one in person last year, which was amazing, and talk about this and then cascade that down. So the other side is training and coaching your line managers, so they listen to the teams, making sure that they do these mini sessions with their own teams as well. And that could be talking about what the behaviours are. Incentivize those to deliver on the behaviours. So we are putting in a incentivization scheme, which is part of sort of a performance pay related scheme, but mini incentives in terms of, if people do really well, giving them kudos, I mentioned, and praise, and celebrating and promoting those successes across the business. Okay, we do, I don't know if you do this as well, I think we're working remotely, each team member is having either mini morning sessions or trying to have at least 15 minutes to half an hour with their team members and a one-to-one on a weekly basis. I think it's a really good way to find out what's going on in people when you're so busy and not walking past them in the office corridor, for example. So, and that feeds back into picking up on things that might not be quite right.
Yeah, it's about working with the different platform, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
and just the different kind of just functionality of how things are going to be in sort of remote working environments.
Definitely.
Yeah. And we did have sort of Sarah kind of put, not a question, but our culture is in place, got good goals, vision and values, but our trustees are concerned about losing this as we stay agile and home-based and don't return together as one team. So yeah, it's kind of that, the more scattered nature of remote and hybrid working patterns, and just how to kind of upkeep culture in that. But it's a tricky one.
Sarah, on that one, I was just reading that. It was quite an interesting one. Just out of interest, have you gone back to review the goals and the vision and values to adapt them to the fact that we're now more agile and home-based? Just wondered if that's something or are they still the same goals and vision and values that you had prior to the new working way of working that we have now? Yeah, and you're not alone in that. I think everyone is. I think Teams, for example, is a good example where when you're in an office, people can see when you've got your head down and you're working, and they won't disturb you. I think when you're on something like Teams and you're working from home, there is that people will still ring you or message you, and everyone feels that sense of urgency. They must reply, or what are they going to think if I'm on orange? They'll think I'm not working, I must be away. And and also when you ring somebody on Teams, some of the niceties that have gone, that when you're in the office, you would walk up and say, oh, do you have a nice, did you watch Netflix last night? Or I love your top, those types of things that you just those human things, everyone's straight into it with a Teams call or a meeting. It's actually increased meetings in a long way, which I think has had a huge impact on company culture. So that's something we put in place. We're just about to roll out a new policy, a wellbeing policy, and it was around Teams etiquette. So whatever tool you're using as your remote working tool, your technology, it's how we use that and monitor that and communicate. So it's used in the best way, and people still are getting a break. I don't know if that just helps as well, because I think that's had a huge change on culture.
Yeah, I think unless anyone else is gonna pop a question in, I think that was everyone. Trisha, I was not sure if it's my sound, but is there a dog barking?
There is a dog barking. Yeah, love them. I believe it is my dog barking at the postman, so I do apologise.
It's a classic, isn't it?
One of the trials of working from home.
Yes. Oh, brilliant. But yeah, I think yeah, unless anyone else has got a question they want to pop in, I reckon that will pretty much conclude our webinar today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. It's been really, really brilliant to hear your thoughts around this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And yeah, I'll kind of bring things to a close then. So yeah, everyone, please do join me in thanking Karen for her time and expertise. It would be great to hear what you thought about the webinar in the chat. So please do let us know, and thank you for all your questions as well. Just as a reminder, we'll be sending you all a follow-up email, which will include a full recording of today's webinar and a reminder of any sort of future webinars we've got coming up. We do have ones coming up in February, so we'll let you know about those. And yeah, we do hope to see you at future webinars. Yeah, a couple of people have popped in the chat. Excellent and thought-provoking. Thank you, Karen.
Oh, good.
Yeah, agreed. And yeah, someone says thank you very much. We're going to look at that PwC report. Yeah, it's been really insightful. Yeah, fabulous. All right,
Thank you so much.
things off then. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye.